Enroll your child for the manifested e-learning platform and see their grades grow tremendously. These videos can be downloaded to a laptop for offline viewing or viewed from a smartphone in a course-friendly format.
Hello learners, welcome back to Manifested Online Classes. As always, I'm your teacher, Mercy Mboya. In the previous lesson, we talked about noun derivations. I gave you the different suffixes that you can use to form nouns, and I also gave an assignment which I hope has been attempted. In this lesson, we are going to discuss about something different, something that is also going to help you even in your life after school. So please make sure that you listen, take notes where necessary. So we are going to be talking about gender sensitive language. Before I start, language is very important, and it is also very important for you to learn to express yourself in front of other people, or even when you want to ask something from somebody, or when you're given the responsibility to address people in a gathering, or even your friends, the way you speak to them. It is very important because it gives them a lot of details about yourself. That means you have to learn to communicate effectively, because communication is key. It will determine, it will give you higher chances, of course, of getting a job, or even some of you that will be entrepreneurs, your language will help you to convince customers to buy the goods that you're selling, and it will also help you to have meaningful interactions socially. Remember that your social life is also important. So that means you have to learn to communicate effectively, so that as you communicate, you do not end up offending somebody within your audience, or you do not end up offending anybody and making them unable to get the message that you're trying to convey. That's why in English, we make it a priority to teach you about etiquette. Now I'm here teaching you about gender sensitive language, so that you can be great communicators in the different aspects of your life. Even when you communicate to your parents, you need to communicate effectively for you to be well understood. So what does this mean? Gender sensitive language. Of course, we have had discussions on the issue of gender for a very long time. The language, of course, some aspects of the language, or some words, especially from the English language originally, were meant to address the male gender only. But then with time, the language has been able to also develop terms that can also be used to address the female gender. That is because professions mostly were held by men. So, for example, let's look at a word like a policeman. We also have women that are policemen, that work in the police force. So it would be wrong for you when you address a group of police officers to refer to them as policemen, because within that group we also have people from the feminine gender. So when you do that, when you address them as policemen, you're actually being gender biased. And that would also mean that you're going to lose the attention of the female audience, because they are going to feel like you're not addressing them. You're actually only talking to the male, the people of the male gender within your audience. So it is very important to pay attention to such small details, as they may make you an ineffective communicator. I'm going to start this by giving you a few sentences. Then we will read through the sentences and try to see whether the sentences actually are gender biased or are actually gender sensitive. So my first sentence will be, the doctor said he needs to perform the surgery soon. We could also have another sentence, number 2. We say, Mary is in the head and then we could also have another sentence where we have policemen are supposed to keep the citizens safe. And then I could also write another sentence. Then the last sentence there we can have I want us to go through these sentences. When we go through these sentences, you will be able to understand the difference between gender-sensitive language and gender-biased language. So when you talk about gender-sensitive language, that is using language that is acceptable to all genders. Remember, we have two genders. We have the female gender and we have the feminine and the masculine gender. And then when you talk about gender-biased language, is when you use language that is biased against one gender. So you could use language that is biased, a word that is biased against the female gender, or one that is actually biased against the male gender. For example, we have the people that serve us or take care of passengers in the plane. They are mostly ladies. Many people, therefore, are used to referring to them as air hostesses. So the hostess, or that word there means that is actually it is only used to refer to the female gender. Yet, in the same profession, we also have men. So when you stand in front of people and talk about an air hostess, you're being biased against the male gender, and your language could actually be said to be gender biased, which is wrong. So you could go for more neutral terms like a flight attendant, because you can use that when you're talking to a female, somebody from the feminine gender or somebody from the masculine gender. So let's go back to our sentences. So the first sentence says, the doctor said he needs to perform the surgery soon. Our subject in this sentence is actually the doctor. And then we have a pronoun here that is used to refer to the doctor. The doctor said he needs to perform the surgery. So in your own understanding, do you think this sentence is gender sensitive or it's actually gender biased? Let's move on to the second sentence. We have Mary is in the headmistress's office. So of course we have headmistress and we also have Mary. We go to the third sentence. Policemen are supposed to keep the citizens safe. So we have policemen. And then the third sentence we have students. The fourth, students should take care of their stationaries. Then we have students. And then we have their. And then a candidate should have his or her pen. So we have candidate there. Yes. And then we have his or her pen. The pronouns that I've just underlined here stand in place of the subject of the sentence. So let's start with the first one. The doctor said he needs to perform the surgery soon. That sentence is grammatically correct, but it is actually gender insensitive. This is because all doctors are not actually men. We also have doctors that are actually female, and because we do not know the person, the specific gender of the person that we are addressing, it would be wrong to just say the doctor said he, because maybe the doctor is actually female. So what do you think she's going to feel if you are actually referring to her as being a he? So this sentence is actually gender insensitive, and we could change it to be gender sensitive by actually saying the doctor said he or she, because we don't know the gender of the doctor. When you go to the second sentence, Mary is in the head mistress's office. So when you use the head mistress's, the noun head mistress here, it talks about somebody that is in charge of an institution but is actually female. But not all the people that are in charge of our primary schools are actually female. Some of them are actually male. So instead of talking about the headmistress's office, it would have been better if we had used a word like head or head teacher. Because the word teacher is gender neutral, it can be used to refer to either a male teacher or actually a female teacher. Let's move on to the third sentence. Policemen are supposed to keep the citizens safe. This sentence is also gender insensitive or gender biased because policemen, all the people that work round the clock to make sure that we are safe, to protect us against any attacks and to just keep us safe, we have some that are actually mothers, some that are actually sisters to people, some that are actually sisters-in-law to people. So it is not all of them that are actually male. And when you look at this word, it is derived from the word man. Men, which is the word that we use to describe the people from the masculine gender. So instead of talking about policemen, you could actually use police officers. So when you talk about police officers, this term is actually gender neutral or gender sensitive because it is not used to refer to the male gender only or the female gender only. Then let's go to this sentence here. Students should take care of their stationaries. So that sentence is actually gender sensitive for the reason that a student can either be male or female. There's no dictation. We cannot say we only have male students or we only have female students. So they can come from either of the genders. And then by making use of the pronoun there in plural, we have made the sentence gender neutral. For example, if the sentence was a student should take care of his stationaries, then we would say that that sentence is actually gender biased. Then lastly, we have a candidate should have his or her pen. So this sentence here, of course, the subject is the word candidate, and a candidate can be from any gender. I know right now I may be speaking to some of the candidates that will be sitting the exams this year, or all of you are bound to be candidates at one time. If it's not this year, next year, or the other year. So we have some of you that are actually male and others are actually female. So when you use a word like candidate, it is mandatory that you look for a pronoun that is actually gender sensitive or actually make use of the two pronouns to signify the person that you are talking about could be of either of these two genders. So that sentence is actually gender sensitive. In a nutshell, it is very important that you make sure either in your speech or also in writing, you use gender neutral terms or gender sensitive language. I'm going to try and tell you maybe what you can do so that you can avoid being gender biased or using gender biased terms. Of course, we have already, in these sentences that I've given here, I've already given you some of the solutions that lie in there. So the first thing that you can actually do is, number one, use the pronouns that signify gender when your subject addresses a profession, that involves both genders. So what this sentence means is that in the case, for example, in our first sentence here, which says the doctor said he needs to perform the surgery. This is a profession that attracts both of the genders. We have doctors that are female and doctors that are male. So if your subject is something like the doctor, instead of saying said he, use the two pronouns that are used to signify or to show or to denote gender. For example, here you could have the doctor said he or she needs to perform the surgery soon. In another sentence like students should take care of, okay, there is also correct, or you could also have his should take care of. Okay, this already is in the plural, so you cannot use he or she because those are pronouns that are actually in the singular. So let's look at this sentence. A candidate should have his or her pen. So in the cases where you find that your subject, the subject in the sentence is a noun that that talks about both the genders, make use of pronouns such as his or her. I could okay, another thing that you can actually do to avoid being gender biased. Number 2, make use of the second person pronouns. So the pronouns, the second person pronoun is a pronoun such as the pronoun you or even you are. All these are pronouns that are actually in the second person. So I'm going to give an example of a sentence so that you understand what I'm talking about. So for example, if we have a sentence like, I'm giving an example of a sentence. So no one should underrate himself or herself for failing exams. Yes, of course, nobody should underrate themselves for failing. There's always a second chance. You can always redeem yourself. So instead of actually, as much as this sentence we would say that it's actually gender sensitive because you've used himself and herself to represent the two genders that we have, the sentence would communicate better if you'd actually make use of the second person pronouns, and then the sentence changes to be you should not underrate yourselves. You should not underrate yourself for failing exams. All I'm trying to say is because sometimes if you keep using himself stroke herself or she stroke her, sometimes the sentence can actually become ambiguous. So to make the sentence more readable, or at least the sentence to sound better, you could actually make use of the second person pronouns. Even when you are addressing a crowd of people, you should move away from using the gender pronouns his and her. Just make sure that you use you and your, because these are gender neutral. They do not refer to any specific gender. Something else that you could also do, look at a sentence like this one. Mary is in the headmistress's office. And there's actually something that is not correct about this sentence, because the sentence is supposed to communicate that she's actually in the office that belongs to the headmistress. So instead of actually adding the es, I hope you can take this out from the notes that you had written, we should just actually put an apostrophe to show possession, that the office now belongs to the headmistress. So Mary is in the headmistress's office. So to show that the office belongs to the headmistress. So what I'm also driving at is, in the case that you are addressing people, or you are addressing people in generally, avoid using gender biased words like headmistress. Instead, talk about head teacher. Even in a word like policeman, instead of talking about policeman, use a more gender neutral term such as police officer. And also, the other thing that you can do, number 3, to make sure that your language is gender sensitive, is make use of plural pronouns. So look at this sentence. Students should take care of their stationaries. So students here is actually in plural. So when you are dealing with plural subjects, you can make use of this, the pronouns that are actually in plural. We have there, and we also have they, and we also have them, whichever the context is, so that you don't say students should take care of his or her. So just make use of these plural pronouns. And also remember, for you to be able to use a plural pronoun, your subject should also be in the plural. There has to be subject-verb agreement. The same goes for your verbs. So if you make use of those rules that we've talked about, you will be able to communicate, or you'll be able to write out your essays, your articles, your assignments without being gender biased. Practice using this in your speech when you talk to people, and also use your dictionaries to look up more words that you can use that are gender friendly. For example, there's a word that we are always using that is actually, when you talk about humankind, or we talk about mankind, these words can be said to be gender biased, because in these words, if you break them up, there's always the word man. Yet these are words that are supposed to refer to the entire population, and the entire population is comprised of both genders. So instead of talking about humankind or mankind, you could actually use a word that is gender neutral and talk about persons, instead of talking about humankind or actually mankind. Be sensitive, especially when you're addressing a crowd, that is, when you're talking in public, when you're addressing people in public, look for those gender neutral words. In the case that you may be addressing somebody that you already know their gender, I said it is okay for you to talk about a boy, a girl, because those terms are not gender biased. They're already marking there. They know, you know, the person that you're addressing. If you're going to talk about a bachelor, you know that you're talking about somebody of the male gender. If you're talking about a spinster, you know that you're talking about a female. So when you're talking about somebody that you know, make use of the nouns or the words that actually refer to their gender. So with that in mind, I'm just going to do a brief summary of what we've discussed. So I gave you sentences here to try and see for yourself whether the sentences are gender sensitive or not. And we've gone through the sentences and we've actually corrected and marked the ones that are gender sensitive and the ones that are actually gender insensitive. So what I will do, I'll put a tick to the ones that are gender sensitive and then put a cross to the ones that we found to be gender insensitive, so that as you write, you may know how to explain. So the ones that I have put across there, these 3 are gender biased, and these 2 are actually gender sensitive. I went ahead to show you the few ways that you can use to make sure that your language is gender sensitive. So 1, we talked about for you to use pronouns, to use the 2 pronouns when you're talking about when your subject is either talking about a profession that has both men and women. So we said in such sentence like this sentence, you could have said, the doctor said he or she needs, because doctors can be men and they can also be women. We said you could also make use of the second person pronoun, that is you and your. And then I gave an example of a sentence there. And then I also said, the third one, that when you, I'm sorry, let me just write it out for you here. The third point that we discussed. Number 3, when talking about somebody whose gender address them using a noun that represents their gender or use gender specific language. For example, I said if you know the crowd that you're addressing is girls, is boys, you can use those two terms to refer to your audience as that. And then last, the other one I said, so the other thing is that you can make use of the plural pronouns. For example, in the sentence which I've given here, students should take care of their stationaries. That is a very good sentence. We have made use of a plural pronoun which is there. And I said, when you use the plural pronouns, also make sure that the subject is also in plural. So this is an area that will require you to go out of your way and try to look at those terms that are used to refer to the various genders. So I've come to the end of the lesson. I would like to give some work to be done. I'll just write a few sentences there for you to correct, so that the sentences that I give are going to be gender insensitive, so you correct them to be gender sensitive. I'm just going to write the assignment here. Oh, that's the assignment. You should make sure that you attempt the assignment, as it is only through doing practice or doing the assignment that you will be able to know whether you have understood, whether you've understood what I've taught or not. I'm just going to read the instructions for you and read out the sentences so that you make sure what you have written is the correct thing. The instructions are: rewrite the following sentences as instructed in each case in order to remove the sexist use of pronouns. When you talk about sexism, it is when somebody discriminates you because of your gender. So when you say that somebody is a sexist, it is because they discriminate maybe against a girl because that's a girl, or they discriminate a boy because of him being a boy. So this is a type of discrimination based on gender. The first sentence, everybody has his rights. Then you are asked to begin with all of us. The second sentence, nobody should blame himself for it. Then you're asked to begin with people. Then another sentence, a parliament should articulate the views of his people. Then you're asked to begin with parliamentarians. Then we have number 4, everybody wants to pass his exams, doesn't he? Then begin with all of us. Number 5, a selfish person considers only himself. Then begin selfish people. Then number 6, somebody has forgotten his book on the table. Then you're asked to begin with a book. Remember that most of the times gender bias happens, especially when people are making use of pronouns. It is up to you to keep reminding yourself that his and him are pronouns that are used to refer to the male gender, and her, she are pronouns that are used to refer to the female gender. The same goes for reflexive pronouns, because we have herself, himself, and we have others that are neutral like yourself and themselves. Make sure if you are unsure about the person's gender, just use a gender neutral term or a gender neutral pronoun. If you know the term that can be used or that is associated with the person's gender, like we have an actor for a male and actress for a female, go ahead and use those ones. Do as much practice as possible. Research on those words. Your dictionaries can help you. The internet can also help you if you have access to the internet. So this marks the end of the lesson. I hope you've enjoyed yourself, and you're also going to be more gender sensitive when you speak to people so that you don't offend them. My goal is to make you great communicators, and one way of being a great communicator is making sure that you connect to your audience by using the right terms to refer to them, those that do not offend any of the people in your audience. Have a blessed time. Make sure you attempt the assignment. Until next time, bye-bye.
Thank you for choosing to study with us. For more information, you can call us on 0724 173845.